Architect Liza Morales-Crespo has helped design and build structures all over the world. But when she realized just how much common buildings and construction affected the environment, she traded in five-star hotels and luxury condos for sustainable, nature-friendly architecture. Now, Liza is at the forefront of ecological design in the Philippines, with a goal to change the perception of sustainable architecture in the country. Leading Women celebrates Liza Morales-Crespo and her path to making the world a little bit greener. Liza Morales-Crespo, welcome to Leading Women.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Pleasure is ours to get to know all about sustainable architecture, sustainable design, your advocacies. Let's first start, Architect Liza,
Yes.
with sustainable architecture. What exactly does that mean?
They say that construction is a culprit for climate change. More than the pollution that we get from cars, it's really the carbon emissions from the activities related to construction that causes all that damage to the environment. So sustainable architecture is meant to be more aware of that by not creating that kind of damage to the environment, living more consciously. It encompasses more than just energy-saving products. It's about taking into consideration the health and well-being of the occupants. Like for example, when we design, we actually go into specifying what kind of paints, so that the paints that you're inhaling, you spend most of your time indoors. So they're healthy, paints that don't have volatile organic compounds, those kind of things. So it's really taking into consideration the environment, the inside and the outside environment as well.
Have you been always conscious about the environment, conscious about healthy living, conscious about the materials, maybe even the food that you eat?
Parenthood changes people. When I had my firstborn, you kind of start to think okay, what kind of world are we leaving behind? What kind of world are we bringing this child into? And I think that kind of triggered all these sort of emotions and rethinking. And that's when I said, okay, yes, I'm an architect, but I have to do something more than that, something that I could be proud of.
Who did you consult when it came to that change you wanted to make? Because you were so used to the regular type of architecture.
Yeah.
What words?
Conventional or traditional architecture. It wasn't like consulting with someone. It was actually me being proactive and researching, looking into it. I went to school for it. I trained for it. I got the certification. I wanted to make sure that I was qualified.
Is that the LEED?
Yes.
One of the first Filipinos to be given a certification of
The
LEED.
LEED accredited professional.
Yes, that's the leadership in energy and environmental design. How did that make you feel?
You kind of don't really think na, okay, you rest on your laurels, okay, I have the certificate. Now, it was okay, this opens doors for me, so I could do all these things. And you kind of just look past that certification. I really got out and attended green conventions, sustainability, and it really opened my eyes as to what's out there. We have all these things that are available that treats water, all these other things that people aren't aware of. But once you get into that world, you step over that domain of sustainability, it just opens so many possibilities.
Sustainable architecture seems complicated, but Liza explains that one can easily live green from the comforts of their own home. Liza takes me on a tour of one of her design condominiums that has fully embraced ecological design. So Liza, we've been talking about sustainable architecture, and one of the challenges is to have that kind of a lifestyle in an urban setup or in a condominium.
We also work on the interiors of the space aside from doing the architecture. So as much as possible, we try to encourage the use of plants. For example, in this condo, we actually did a research in selecting the type of plants that we used. So the plants that we use here actually have natural air filtration qualities. So they're actually active air cleaners. A lot of thought goes into selecting the type of furniture. As much as possible, we want to make sure that the furniture that we pick are locally sourced. You lessen the carbon footprint, instead of having to transport it overseas. So that's not just the furniture, that's also the finishes.
The fan right
Yes,
above me.
the fans.
It's
Yeah.
so nice to stay here,
Yeah.
right? It's so airy.
Instead of depending fully on air conditioning, we have fans, energy-saving fans, because this one, for example, uses only 30 watts. We make sure that with the sourcing of electrical equipment, appliances, even the plumbing fixtures, that they're good for the environment. So low energy, low consumption. Water is such a big issue right now.
Yes, it is.
And we speak of water. Your drinking water is from a device
Yes.
that collects air and turns it into water. Is that correct?
It's an atmospheric water generator. This is a way of just extracting humidity from the air so that, people can drink it.
And the source of your sunlight, looking outside and seeing more of the surroundings instead of just looking at walls and staring into walls. When you live in a condo, the tendency is there's so many walls.
Yes.
And you feel so cramped inside. But here it's so airy. The window is high ceiling.
Yes. When I work with my project team, the goal is that the owner shouldn't have to turn on the lights at all during the day. It just gives that good energy around the space when it's clean and the air is free-flowing.
This place has so many plants strategically placed. And there's one area, this area. How do you water that up there?
If you look closely, there are these hoses. So it's on timer, like there's a switch here. The thing is with, green architecture or sustainability, you have to make it hassle-free for the clients because it kind of defeats the purpose. Like, okay, we're gonna try to do all these things, but it means more work for you. So that doesn't really make sense. And that does not become sustainable.
If the homeowner doesn't have the liberty of tearing down walls and just moves into the space given, what are the challenges making that home a sustainable one?
Well, of course, that limits our options, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. You could still do stuff, incorporate the use of the paints. Maybe it's just a matter of reconfiguring the layout so that the ones that get the maximum amount of sunlight, that's the one that you use more. The incorporation of plants, sourcing materials. With green architecture or sustainability, less is more. And when I say less is more, it's not the aesthetic mantra, but more of like a functional approach to designing. So the less materials that you use is better for the environment.
Coming up, Liza talks about the challenges she faced in her chosen path, especially in a male-dominated environment. Next on Leading Women. Pursuing a career in architecture came with a lot of difficulty for Liza Morales-Crespo, as entering a workforce dominated by men had many challenges. But Liza had always been a fighter ever since she was a child.
Your exposure to architecture, your dad was into the construction business.
Yes.
And as a little girl, your playground was the construction site.
Yeah.
Your memories of being a little girl in the construction site and the realizations, again, that you had at a very young age.
I grew up with two brothers. I'm the eldest, so I'm the only girl. My father, would bring me to, as I've said, construction site, really heavy construction. You have all these big equipment and stuff. And I never really felt that difference, we weren't treated differently, like me and my siblings. I kind of grew up like a tomboy. And, whatever my brothers did, I would do. They played basketball, I would play basketball with them. So with my dad, that's kind of how I grew, that, okay, you're in this world, like dirty and, like muddy and all that. And when I grew up, that's kind of the world I was exposed to. My mom is also a civil engineer, which was rare for their time.
Yes.
She was probably the only, one of two women in her entire batch. Being a woman in the construction field was something that came naturally to me. And I was never really aware that there's this sort of divide. And that only became apparent, I guess, when I went to school and I practiced much later on in life. But as a young kid, it's like, okay, whatever they were doing, I would also do.
How about the story where you realize that there is a divide, that men are regarded as, correct me if I'm wrong, better, they're more handy?
Yes, that actually became apparent to me when I went into college. I took up architecture. The ratio back then when I was in college, I think it's like 1:3 or even more than that. I think it was like roughly like 1 woman to 3 guys. What became apparent to me, coming from an all-girls school, freshman year, the guys in our class knew how to do freehand drawing and drafting. Like they all had the necessary skills, whereas we were taught how to sew. It wasn't like they treated us inferior, it was just that we weren't as skilled. They came into college like all prepared and ready. And they had that advantage because their schools, the curriculum prepared them for technical field. So it was a struggle, but I think what that taught me was grit, and you have to really persevere. You have this handicap. You have to like work twice as hard as the guys because they have all these advantages. The girls, at least in my batch, had to work a little bit harder to compensate for that. When I was working naman in New York, it was also a bit challenging because I was young. I was just like fresh out of grad school when I worked for this big firm. You have to deal with a lot of the isms. There's racism, there's ageism, sexism. I had to sort of develop an extra layer of skin to be able to survive that. But, all God teaches you grit, as I've said, which, you can take with you the rest of, your life.
After taking further studies focused on sustainable architecture, Liza decided it was time to return to the Philippines and bring back what she learned abroad and put it to use in her home country.
Differences, similarities, more realizations.
One of my companies is Philippine Geogreen, which started 10 years ago when I moved back here in the Philippines. And back then, it was a struggle trying to convince people that, hey, you have to incorporate sustainability, getting people to be more aware. There was this resistance because the concept people had was like, oh, it's too expensive. That was the common misconception. And it took a lot of educating and telling them that for me to design your building, whether it's rotated this way or that way, costs the same amount of money. But one is greener than the other because we're taking into consideration where the sun sets, where the sun rises, all those things. So it was just a matter of convincing them that, hey, it does not necessarily have to be more expensive compared to when the company was started 10 years ago. Now people actually come to us. There's that demand. And people are aware. I guess it's because, climate change, and also our energy is really expensive here. The Philippines has the highest per kilowatt hour rate in all of Asia. So going into energy saving or being more sustainable is really a necessity, more than just like a want. The mindset has improved significantly. Now, people actually come to us wanting to explore going green and being more sustainable. That, I guess, is like a drastic improvement from when we first started. And it's great that there's that growing awareness. It's actually the younger generation who actually demand for it because I guess they're more out there.
Next, Liza discusses the future of green architecture in the Philippines. Coming up on Leading Women. Architect Liza Morales-Crespo is one of the major leaders in the world of sustainable architecture and green living, but she's also branching out to help her community in other ways. Along with a partner, Liza started Tally Handmade, a social enterprise aimed to help female inmates enrich their lives.
Liza, aside from being an advocate, a trailblazer for sustainable architecture, you also have an advocacy for women, Tally Handmade. Please tell us about these.
Okay.
Please tell us about it.
So it's our baby project. We've been around for less than 3 years. It's a social enterprise. It started out more as a hobby between me and my partner. We were thinking, okay, we have to kind of do something different. And that's kind of how Tally Handmade evolved. We do fashion accessories, so bags, which we sell here locally as well as in Europe. So we sell it in Paris. We also sell it all over Asia. We wanted to elevate the craft, create something that we can proudly say is Philippine-made. Aside from doing, something for other disadvantaged communities, we wanted to make sure that it didn't really look and feel like a social enterprise.
Why Tally Handmade? What's the significance of the name?
Tally is because it's made out of the straw that you use to tali, you use for grocery bags.
Yeah.
The second meaning of that name is another layer to that is we wanted to have it as ties that bind women. We work with a lot of female inmates. We wanted them to have a connection to the outside world while they're incarcerated. This is a way for them to reconnect. Aside from giving them pride and ownership of the bags that they create, all the bags are actually named after the women who make them.
Okay.
So we have a Gina bag, we have a Soleil bag, and it gives them dignity and pride while they're in there because some of them are there for quite some time.
How about the Filipinos and how they've received, how they like Tally Handmade? What do they say about it?
We were surprised at the warm response that we got. I mean, this was something that I was never trained. I didn't have any background. I mean, this is not what we were trained to do. And we were just surprised, like, oh, let's just make it into a hobby. And then the reception was so warm. We sold out of our bags, like, I think on the first 3 days of our first trunk show. And we wanted to make sure that the women don't just buy the bags to make it a pittance purchase. We don't want them to feel like, oh, yeah, I bought the bag already and that's my do-good deed already for the year. We wanted them to buy because they like the style, they feel that it's functional, it's something that they could be proud of, and the fact that they're also helping other people out is sort of like a second layer to that. And now we've had to expand to working with stay-at-home moms who otherwise won't really have any options for a means of livelihood. So this was a way to empower women.
What do you like most about empowering women?
It hits me on like so many levels, just on a personal level. When we first started doing this, I thought we were helping them augment their income. Because, you know, for example, the women in jail, a lot of them, their husbands leave them once they're in because they know that they're going to be released for a long time. So, you know, their kids still visit them asking for money, and they were like, what they expect us to do, we're in, how can we provide? But the world doesn't stop turning when they're inside jail. The kids have to go to school, they have to eat, they have to be cared for. They're stuck with this dilemma like, okay, how will we provide for them? So this was a way we thought of helping that aspect, the financial aspect. But what we realized, like just going into these jails, when we speak with these women, kinakamusta namin, how are you doing na? You see their aura is different. They're like so happy. And you know, they say more than the financial is one aspect of the help that we're giving. But what to them is, you know, most important, we're working with us, is that it gives them a reason to live. So that to me is like so powerful, an effect that me and my partner never ever anticipated. That they said, you know, like I was depressed because I didn't know, like there was no court date. I don't know how long I'm gonna be here for. So that would be, you know, could be 10, 5 years or whatever, nobody knows. But for me to get up every morning because I have to finish a couple of bags, instead of like just, you know, brooding, you see the change in their persona, the change in their aura from the first time they started, they're like this depressed and all that, and after they're like so cheerful and happy. I would like to think that we helped them, but I think more than that, they helped us. These people who have, you know, all these limitations could be positive. What right do I have to complain? So that to me was, you know, something that I never expected. I guess, you know, that's just powerful in its own.
Environmental issues have taken center stage all over the world in recent years. And Liza believes that the future of green architecture is in good hands with the next generation.
Exciting times ahead as we look to the future of sustainable living or sustainable architecture, sustainable design in the country. How do you see the future?
What I'm hoping for is that there shouldn't be that distinction going into sustainable architecture or sustainable construction, that sustainability becomes a lifestyle. It comes second nature to people. There's still a lot of avenues, and I'm hoping that it's not just like, okay, I'm doing like a sustainable house and it stops there. It has to transcend that and really permeate every cell in our body, that you live green, you do all these little practices that really advocate for a sustainable lifestyle. In my office, I tell people that we have to walk the talk. It's not enough that we're selling green products and we distribute them, but even in our practices like recycling everything, we use solar panels. We hardly consume any electricity. We make sure that even all their trips, if they have to use a service vehicle, they're planned out so that all the ones going to that route, so we're not really, you know, back and forth, and, you know, we're really conscious about it, and I tell them that's the culture that we have here. It has to actually be something that's internalized by everyone in the organization.
Hearing these words from you, it's easy being green if there's a conscious effort and people are aware and people listen.
Yes.
Not only listen to their bodies, but listen to the environment as well.
Yes, because, you know, we only have one Earth. We're here for a limited time, and we have to think about the future generations as well.
A leading woman taking care of the environment, taking care of the people around her, and making sure the entire country and the planet even is green.
Yeah.
Liza, what to you is a leading woman?
For me, a leading woman is somebody who defines it herself. That's the thing. We could define what that means for ourselves. We could constantly evolve. I think I'm on like version 3 of me right now. You know, I had that architect phase, and then now I'm into tally handmade, and then I went into teaching. So it's constantly evolving. And I think being a woman allows us to defy stereotypes. Somebody who sets out her own path and defies all convention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Liza Morales-Crespo studied to be an architect of condominiums, 5-star hotels, and more. But she decided to pursue a different path, one that she believed would be crucial in helping save the environment. Sustainable architecture may sound like something very daunting, but Liza is determined to spread awareness about ecological design and, in effect, help build a better world.